Working with NGOs provides glimpses of all shades of human conscientiousness. It's perhaps not for everyone, though I would argue everyone would benefit from experiencing just what NGO employees go through to get their work done. Some would also benefit from seeing just how hard NGO employees work, how long they work, and also how much of their free time is taken up by giving voice to their ideals, helping to spread the word, demonstrate, and meet with supporters and donators outside of normal working hours. Yet NGOs are facing huge challenges. Their funding is being reduced. Governments say because there is no money, despite spending billions on militarization to provide security for problems created by their own foreign policies. Private donations are slowing down either because the economic situation is worrying and making ends meet is a struggle, or because propaganda is being spread by a malignant media intent on silencing the voices that prioritize human rights. This episode brings together a panel from various NGOs, but speaking here on a personal basis and not as representatives of those organizations. My thanks go to Jessica from Save the Children, Michael from Amnesty International, Manuela from Boehringer Ingelheim, and of course Saroj, also from Save the Children, but also the inspiration behind the project. Saroj, Silke, and Yiuriu created a little discussion group some years ago, having identified the need to address similar concerns in different NGO sectors. The result of their endeavors was a questionnaire sent out to NGO employees and also the recipients of NGO projects in their communities. The idea was, and still is, to create a complete picture of understanding of the work NGOs do, to find out what communities need, and to help NGOs fulfill both the hopes as much as is possible of those communities, while also providing meaningful satisfaction to their own principles and creating engagement and learning opportunities for members and donators. After phase 1 of the responses, we wanted to present a discussion on the findings of the responses we received. With this podcast episode, we would like to reach out to diverse voices from further afield and to hear from people with different hopes and expectations. Help us to understand what you need and let the NGOs explain how they are trying to meet those demands. Somewhere in among all of the thoughts and opinions people have lie the answers to what we're all looking for. My thanks to the respondents of the questionnaire. Without your input, we would not have been able to address so many relevant issues. And I also want to thank Saroj for bringing me into the project and also for inviting the panelists to take part in this episode. My thanks to Jessica, Manuela, and Michael for your time and insight. It's never easy squeezing 2 hours in between meetings. This is Two and a Mic. Rise up and be curious.
Dung weche pek kod welo mabiro e Two and a Mic. Dung parodit kod jok mawuoye Two and a Mic. Seche tin sud buta wawinji e Two and a Mic. Ola wachokre wabed piny bi wawinje ero chako Dung omit ndi Two and a Mic podcast makende.
It's not often that I do a panel discussion episode, but very happily that is the case. Before we jump into the main topics behind why we are here today, let's get some introductions going so that the listeners have an idea of who is who. So let's start with Manuela.
Yeah, my name is Manuela Pastore, and I'm here in 2 different roles. On one side, I work for Boehringer Ingelheim, leading an initiative called Making More Health. It's a social entrepreneurial initiative. My other big role is I'm an international coordinator of a Kenyan network of NGOs. So I try to bring in a lot of partners on an international level, and this is me.
Super. Thank you for joining us, Manuela. Michael, how about you?
Yeah, hello. I'm Michael van den Broek. I work in Berlin for Amnesty International Germany as a digital transformation manager. And apart from digital transformation, there's quite some organizational development involved as well, and that has the strongest overlap with the topic we'll be talking about, I think.
Super. Thank you also for joining us. Jessica.
Yes, good morning. I'm Jessica. I'm working for Save the Children Germany as the Director for Fundraising and Marketing. Nice to be here.
Super. Yeah, great to have you with us. And another participant in the panel who needs no necessary introduction because you've been here so many times before, Saroj.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about, well, for a start, the organization that you are also at, but and thereafter, perhaps lead into the background to this discussion as well.
Yes, thank you, Zach. Sorry, I was gonna say Michael because my role in Save the Children is exactly like Michael's, the digital transformation manager, and I work on a different topic, very related digital topics in Save the Children Germany. However, the topic that we're going to talk about today is something that I'm motivated and do privately in my little free time that I have. And here it is about looking at the impact of NGOs that they create in Germany or at an international level. I think it's pretty similar, and I wanted to see whether it is similar or not. And I was curious about are we really having an impact that we want to have? Because I see people putting in their 150% in the office. They go back home and they have their own private life, but they really are motivated bunch of people. And regardless, not only talking about Save the Children, I was with Amnesty before, it's the same story everywhere. Are we really creating the impact? And if we are not, what's the problem? And where do we see the industry sees itself in 30 years, 10 years from now, in 2030? Let's make it shorter. And I got to know like-minded people, Yiuriu and Silke, who were passionate about the same topic and said, let's do something about it. And I like a sentence like that, let's do something about it. And we said, what? And we were generating ideas like, how about we come together and talk about what are you going through? And because we're all working 100%, we had little time to really do something about it. And at the end decided, let's have a questionnaire that we send to people and collect instead of asking people to come and meet us, which might be the case in the future. That will be very helpful. But we said as a first step, we could do this. In the meanwhile, Save the Children also had, Jessica, you might remember, Reimagine as a topic, which happened 3 months after we were starting. And I said, oh yeah, we are doing the same. So it's not only us seeing this problem, Save the Children being a big international NGO sees the problem, that we have to reimagine ourselves. We have to reframe what we're saying and what we're doing, maybe also rethink. And we said, okay, that gave us the confidence to go ahead. So we collected a few questions that we sent around. And thank you guys for answering those questions. And yeah, that's why we are here today, to talk about what came back as answers.
Yeah, succinctly put. And and also among or during that process, you also asked if I had any thoughts, and that's how I was attached to this wonderful and inspirational exercise. So let's quickly have a look at that then. So let's quickly look at the biggest challenges facing NGOs, because this is one of the first parts as well. And Manuela, if it's possible to come to you. So one of the most common themes for the challenges side of things that NGOs face is money.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. And especially now in the past month and years, this becomes harder and harder because the traditional funding they got become much less. And this has to do, of course, with politics and the general situation, but of course also with how people now are informed and the messages they get. So indeed, the traditional funding seems not to work anymore very well. And this leads to very, very big issues on the ground, I have to say. Beside the fact that we have also official cuts from, let's say, medication, which came from US aid and so on, such kind of things as well.
Yeah, because you work in sort of two more or less geographical areas, so Germany on the one hand, but then you also said you work with a group of Kenyan NGOs, so on an international basis. Where do you see those cuts actually hitting harder? So obviously with regards to USAID, then there is one particular source of funding which is no longer there. But if you were to compare then currently domestically and internationally based on your experience, where would you say it's a sharper pain that is felt?
I would definitely say the pain is the hardest where we have the most vulnerable communities. In my case, because I'm much more in Kenya than in Germany, I'm active, so I would say it really hit there the poorest, the most, those who already struck or had a lot of struggle, challenges in the past, because here it's the basic needs which have or where they experience these cuts. Of course, I would say even in Germany, if you look here at vulnerable communities, we have similar issues, and it is on one side definitely the official funds that are missing, but on the other side we also realize that even private people start to invest in different things, or they are very hesitant to support what they supported before, because they say now we want to do it in different ways, and it should be more social entrepreneurial, or it should be more systemic, which is right. But this does not mean that we need also the short-term money. And what I mean is if we have, let's say, very basic needs, because there is hunger. For example, June is in Kenya always a very critical month due to the missing harvest. And so if people really have hunger and they would need food kits, people start to struggle because, let's say, donations in a traditional way are not highly rated anymore. So, or they just invest in where officially the media also see the big crisis. Of course, this is still happening. But in many other countries, we have also the need for short-term fundings. And I do not want to say that this is now the way to go, but we cannot just do the changes that we need to do and then leave behind what worked in the past.
Jessica, Save the Children, it's on the one hand a fantastic idea, just those three words. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody who would disagree with those three words. On the other hand, it's also a call to action, isn't it? Save the children. Are you also struggling for money?
Yes. If you look at the global scale on the lack of still fulfilling children's rights, and if you keep in mind the tendency towards less public funding, more polarization, more focus on your own economic and geopolitical interests, becomes very evident that organizations like Save the Children, but any other non-profit, realize even those who have been relying a lot on receiving public funding are now even more relying on increasing private funding. So what we would need is a thriving civil society and people who really want to engage and share responsibility at a global scale. In our case, to help children in need, but obviously you could transfer that to climate crisis, human rights, and so on and so forth. I think on your question, of course, the biggest negative impact is felt locally. And I would add to the people themselves, of course, all the many local organizations, non-profit, grassroots organizations, they are even more affected, tremendously affected than global NGOs. But organizations like Save the Children had a very, very big cut last year, following the executive orders by the Trump administration.
Yeah, a painful deficit. And Michael, Amnesty, recent years has also had funding issues, has it not?
Yeah, be it in a slightly different way, because like one of the strengths I would say of Amnesty is that it's fully public funded, so the public by the public, so the civil society, which Jessica referred to, and therefore so the public governmental cuts have less of an impact. But obviously, the cuts to all other organizations then in the end have a downstream effect, right? Because there's only so much money that the general public has. So I think, as with every organization, it's also a point of attention for us very much, but in a different way, so to say. So we were affected differently, and maybe certainly less than organizations that like were relying on state funding.
I'm going to connect that with the next topic, but before we do that, we can't skip a topic without speaking with Saroj as well. So, okay, obviously you work in the same organization as Jessica, but in general then, because you also have ties to NGO activities in India, with the Deutsche Umwelthilfe, and so therefore you are perhaps familiar in other situations with regards to the effect or impact of a lack of funds. What thoughts do you have on this?
There's definitely that I've heard about from Welthungerhilfe, but also other NGOs in India that have been impacted financially. There is this is general regardless of what you're looking at. The international NGOs that are active in India have to ramp down and have to cut down on their overheads, my favorite topic, but we'll talk about it later as well. But the local NGOs have figured out, like Jessica has been doing in Save the Children, I know it very well, you probably can explain it better, they're trying to figure out other ways of funding. They're going a lot more heavier into corporate funding, selling their impact vision with corporates and their support, or grassroots funding. So that dependence on institutional funding, they have seen as a problem and are trying to reduce and trying to open up differently, so to say. Yeah, but impact is pretty clear. What also I wanted to point out, one thing that Manuela said, that the agenda, what I would call it in a way that, you have to pick up a topic that sounds good on media or thing. And that's something that I have seen constantly also in the answers that we got, that we kind of have to take an agenda that is given to us instead of taking the problems at grassroots level and attacking them, coming together and take care of the problem that is there. And not the problem that looks good, the problem that the government wants to support, the problem that is active right now. So it's a bit of a inverted world, so to say.
Sometimes it becomes even a bit strange, I have to say, because, for example, what you said, Saroj, there are certain topics which seems to be even in this sector very sexy. For example, investing in women, and I'm a woman, I love if women are supported, that's not the point, but sometimes it gets up to the point where only women are supported. And I mean, women are living in a society, they live with men, they live with children, so you cannot just support women without supporting even their own environment and the men.
Everything that's connected, correct.
And this sometimes I really had, on the ground, I had experiences where men approached me and said, would you also come and have a look at our saving books, let's say, at a grassroots level, and not just working with women. So I've had groups, and I was really shocked, because even myself, I got into that issue at a certain time. And here I see a bit an issue. It's not that supporting women, supporting children is something that we should not do. No, we should. But we cannot just think in these kind of boxes. Yeah. And I think this is becoming a bit more critical. Definitely, actually. Another thought I wanted to add, of course, is the role of corporates, which is good. I see that, of course, based also on the SDGs and everything that happened afterwards. Now, many corporates have developed their own strategies to invest, which is always helpful and very much appreciated. It is a bit, of course, they look even for win-win approaches, which makes it on one side even more sustainable. On the other side, they set the agenda. And sometimes they set the agenda based on their business skills. I mean, corporates are from the business world. So they think business when they work with human beings on the ground at the end. And here sometimes I also see a bit challenges because they invest in what they think is somehow also a reinvestment, or it's long-term investment, or it's paying back, or and therefore they have also their favorite topics only, or impact investment, which is a good thing, but impact investment alone does now not cover the big gap, the big lack that we have mentioned before. For example, really to support now in a more systemic, holistic way. Or certain, let's say, or children or women or men or a region or whatever it is. But they are just looking very exclusively like they are looking in marketing products. So they like, that's how they also do it now, right? Which is, as I said, it is not negative, but it is not, let's say, covering even some of the most important aspects that we would need to cover.
Can I ask a question on that regarding the term impact investment? Because I'm not familiar with the term in the background. I just looked it up. But do you think there is because it has impact in the term, but it seems to have a very specific definition. Do you think it's possible to widen the definition?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot speak for now for the corporate world as a whole. I can just base it a bit on my experiences. It's very interesting. First of all, I realize that now after a few years, people also question what is this impact? Yeah. And can we really measure the impact? You know, business people need numbers, KPIs, so they start to measure. And then the first thing I would say is we do not measure impact. We measure the outreach. Yeah. Impact is for me something that is long-term, where you really change where people can change and be empowered. So this is difficult because it has many components. So this impact investment that I observe in many companies, bigger companies, is now they are investing in, let's say, promising social startups, social enterprises, rather than investing in traditional NGOs. And this means they want to see also first success stories of that kind of social entrepreneurs, of social businesses. So, so they for sure have an impact with the investment on these social startups to grow them, to accelerate, even with skills, not just financially. But let's say even these social enterprises, if we see them as an additional player to the NGOs, they are normally focusing on one aspect only. Yeah, but here now we come to another aspect of it. I think in the past this was very common, and this is also maybe also what human beings like a lot, whether now they're business people or not. They like to understand when they give money or skills, what is the impact? Yeah, so I give a certain amount, and then I see, let's say in a village now there are 10 goats more, or 5 families can benefit. Or if I say it on a business level, I support a social enterprise, and in 1 year, for example, mobile clinic they set up, they could grow them from 10 to 100 in a certain region. So it is a bit difficult to really look at all the roots that cause the issues, and really to find the roots of the poverty, of the challenges women have living in a certain area. It is again a bit
So we take a point that is interesting and there we invest, but we don't feel responsible now really to understand what are all the causes, the roots, and what needs to be done, and how can we maybe also identify partners, collaborate with international, national NGOs, and really change the full situation people live in. And this is what I would wish. But on the other side, I understand that even business, or let's say even private people, they love it when they have their own small angle where they invest in, and then they see the numbers after. Ideally short term as well, the outcome, the impact. And this is, and I'm very happy that you brought that up, because impact is a kind of buzzword. Yeah, I mean, many people use it without even defining well what it is. And I'm not even sure if there is this one unique definition of what is impact, because it's also very difficult to measure what is impact. Yeah.
Another point which came up during the questionnaire, and I think it's important for us to look at things from different perspectives. You all mentioned that private contributions have gone down, and some people have observed that donors were concerned that too much money was being spent on internal administrative costs or training and so on. Is that something which you feel is being communicated a bit harshly to the public? Because if you don't have an administration which is working hard on trying to provide the kinds of services that they have promised the local communities or individuals or people that they have promised to try to benefit, how can that money effectively get there in any case? Jessica, do you have any thoughts on that? And are you familiar with some of these criticisms yourself?
Yes, of course. It's a very common question or remark from individuals, both privately in my family of circles of friends, who are very critical, especially towards big global NGOs. And it's also I think it's a very common issue. I like to refer to the DZI in Germany, the Deutsche Zentralinstitut für soziale Fragen. Don't ask me how it is in English, but because they actually promote the 7 rules of giving. And one of it is on administrative costs and on the fact that a certain amount, a certain percentage of administrative costs is absolutely necessary, good, and recommendable. And I would really, I try to advocate a lot on that, because I think all nonprofits are very conscious, in line with their vision, to contribute as much as possible to the programming or the political work, on all the direct costs that can create impact or can create a change. On the necessary administrative costs, I really think we need a switch in our minds. And I would even argue that we could do more jointly by talking more about it, by giving more stage to why administrative costs are actually good. So that's one angle, and the other is that I really have a strong opinion on donating unrestricted money, which I understand is sometimes a bit challenging, because you have this idea of, if I donate 50 euros, just like Manuela said, we might have 9 instead of 5 goats. Oh, this is a bad example because it doesn't correspond to my amount. Yeah. But in any case, just to make the point, as I think in advertising as a non-profit, so in asking for funding, it is the most effective way. I mean, we test that on a daily basis. The most effective way of generating donations is to be as simple and clear as possible, ideally on topics like malnutrition, because it's very easy to understand. Everybody understands a hungry child versus a healthy child, while actually the vision and the work that Save the Children, for instance, is doing is much more about the systemic change that Manuela was talking about, because we are a global organization, but we are heavily connected to local actors of all kinds in the countries, in the 110 countries we are working in. So that's why one of the reasons why I am since 2014 with Save the Children, because I really believe in the programmatic approach of not designing programs for people in need, but actually asking the children and the families and the actors within the communities, what is it that you need, and to be part of the design and to be part of the planning and the implementation, and of course the change that we can jointly achieve. And I think that's really a very important point. But so what I want to say is two things. So one is, I think administration costs are good, and they are usually too low. If you look at those, let's say, well-known institutions, I think they are usually too low. You could achieve much more impact if you would have even better administrative structures. And secondly, in order to create that impact, and given that we rely much more on funding by the private, by people like you and I, it is important to understand, to perhaps differentiate between the real approach, the complex systemic approach that we are taking as an organization, and how to convey the message in a very clear and simple way. So it took me some time to find the balance, and I think meanwhile it might be the most promising and successful way to keep the message simple, as long as your work stays systemic, but you don't need to explain the whole system to each and everyone who just wants to donate 10 euro per month to help children in need.
Yeah, this is exactly what I named change engineer. So you would be a change engineer because you see the whole thing, and but it is too complex to communicate it to the public, or even within a company. If people do not really work on it and are very deep in it, it is very difficult to see all these aspects. Mm-hmm. So we are somehow having this challenge: be very clear, authentic when you communicate, and make it simple to understand, make it emotional that people understand it and are also willing to follow you. And on the other side, the money that comes in, to really use it in a way that it makes sense when we talk about systemic change. And this is the role of a change engineer, somehow. And without having change engineers, I would definitely say it has not really a sustainable impact. So then, of course, it's like when you travel and you see it. There are many tourists somewhere, and they see an issue and they give some money. Okay, people may buy idly some food, but then it's gone. And if we really want to change the situation children live in, or other people, then it means we need to bring in much more in terms of how we do that, which problems do we try to solve in parallel, whom do we need to bring in as well. It's not just about getting funds, it's also about finding the right partners at the right moment to tackle the issues in the right sequence on the ground, right? It's like building a house. This is what I try to work with pictures when I explain, and I say, okay, look, normally people, they give you the stones and the tubes and the cement and the roof and the windows, but then you need these people that we call the administrators or the change engineers, who have this vision how to build a house and then also organize it in the right way. You cannot start with a roof or the windows without having set up the walls. And you cannot build walls if you don't have the stones. So this role you describe is a very complex one, but it's a very important one, really, to get at the end the full house.
Otherwise, you will just have single materials here and there. And let's say in a translated way, isolated projects, which start and are nice, but at the end, they will not be the foundation of a real growth of something. Yeah.
This really is speaking to what the final analysis talked about. It's very resonating really well, because I was thinking when I got the responses and I was trying to analyze, thinking, so what is it trying to tell me? What is, like, can I put it into little words? And realized, okay, the NGO industry is facing capability gap, which is to do with funding, right, and overhead costs and all of that, and legitimacy gap. By legitimacy gap is the tension between reality and expectation, and that's what you were talking about, Jessica, right now. That there is, and Manuela, you as well. There's a complex long-term change that we are expected to solve. By we, I mean NGO industry, but there should be simple, immediate results. There is need in investment in people and system, but the overhead costs should be low. There is a political driven for Amnesty. You have to be politically speak against right-wing voices, but your service delivery should be very neutral. I think there's a contrast of what reality is and what is expected out of you is what is putting the industry in tension. And Jessica, you have an amazing thing. Okay, you figured it out, and Save the Children is probably looking at programmatic way, and maybe this is the way. Maybe there's more that we can do, but yeah, we do need to get ourselves out of the tension and find ways to, and maybe one of the ways is not telling NGOs to change, but also donors and other people to kind of see things differently. I don't know what you have to say about that, Michael. I see you smiling.
I'm smiling because it's not that I, per definition, don't agree, but it's a bit presumptuous to tell donors what to think, right? Because
That's
in
true.
the end, but at the same time, it's also, you could also call that speaking truth to power, and in the end, they are very much power, right? They are those that fund our work. Then regarding these insurmountable, maybe they're like paradoxes, so that they sound like they don't go together. So you spoke about, you mentioned Amnesty, right? So the rise of right-wing narratives, and then at the same time trying to stay neutral to that. And I have a tendency, like as before in my question to Manuela, to ask, okay, like what's then the definition, right? So what's the definition of neutral, or what's the definition of right wing? So in Amnesty we fight for in the end for human rights, and like personally I always have a tendency to look around and say, oh yeah, many people around here, like either in the office or in the brighter movement, tend to be more on the left-wing side of the political spectrum, but human rights are not a left-wing thing. Human rights are a universal thing that to like up until you come to the extreme, right? It's something like within the core of, let's say in Germany, CDU voter, they would also say, no, I want a society that's based on human rights, and you can have difference of opinion on how to get there, and what, again, also there, what the exact definition of a certain human right is. But it's, so I think the challenge is to try to rephrase a couple of things also in such a way that they become that a wider spectrum of people say, well, yeah, no, of course, yeah, that's actually what I want as well. And then a challenge at the same time is, okay, where do you draw the line, right? So where do you say, okay, the sort of political language you're using right now, that is just fundamentally unacceptable. And like, it's not my role to within the organization to have these difficult to answer these difficult questions on a daily basis, and I very much admire the colleagues who work on that. But I think it's a very relevant question to say, okay, what's the definition, and how do we make that as big as possible without giving up on our core values?
Yeah, it's interesting because before when I said to you, Michael, that I wanted to broach another topic which was somehow connected, and then as is always the case, Saroj brings it to a point which is kind of a great introduction to that topic. And you mentioned also a word, funny, presumptuous. It's presumptuous of organizations to tell donors how they should think, but the communication coming from governments in some countries, and also heavily right-wing owned media companies, which unfortunately are the vast majority, do exactly that. They tell people how they should think about human rights organizations like Amnesty, for example. They tell people what political perspective they should implement when donating money, which areas to donate money to, and for what reasons. And a part of the reason why Amnesty perhaps in recent years has received less money from the public, in private individuals, is because they have been told Amnesty is working against X, Y, and Z, for example. And people have taken that on board, in particular in Germany. So there are powers out there that are telling people you should behave in a certain way with regards to this or that other organization.
Yeah, there will be. But so in the end, they are public companies, and we are a neutral, a non-governmental organization, right? So they have a different position in that as we have. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure if I can. Look, I certainly cannot answer it on behalf of Amnesty. Look, I will have my personal opinions on it, and there I would. And my personal opinion would be go into a conversation about the narratives and assume that people are not stupid, because most people are not stupid. But you need to be able to understand. So as you say, like the media atmosphere in which they shape their worldview, you need to understand it to be able to use the words to like seduce them. Sounds like a negative thing, but I would say seduce them to a more kinder and also more realistic world. So I think that's the thing. So kinder is not naive. It's if you look around you, so many people are kind on a daily basis to each other, and but it's a narrative struggle. One worth fighting.
Now, when I listen to you, so I was just thinking, it is about needs that are communicated, even let's say by the right wing, and these needs are recognized by people, otherwise they would not react, right? So the needs definitely are there, and I was just wondering if on the other side we should not become even better to communicate the needs. And I'm not just talking about the needs of the, let's say, vulnerable communities, what homeless people need or what poor people need, but even on what we need to do the work we do in a better way. Yeah, so how we act. And this would also then touch, if we want to make it more systemic, more long-lasting, better, then we need administration. People would start to understand it. We need to invest more in partnering and in networks. I think people could follow that thing. And this would even mean that somehow we would need to start to measure it and to publish such kind of numbers. How many partners come together to change it? How are different solutions connected, and not just measure isolated projects? So what I want to say is, maybe we are still much too weak in communicating the how we act to make understand why we do in the way we do the things. And this could lead even to a change and a buy-in, let's say, from our potential funders, supporters.
customers, because this is at the end what the others do as well.
Question, Manuela, for exactly what you said, that we are maybe we need to communicate better as an NGO on what we need to be able to provide. I find that amazing, the way to look at it. But is there maybe a fear of losing the funding if we communicate exactly what we need? Is there something that is stopping us, or is it something that we haven't actually thought about? Is it really there's a fear behind being very realistic and true?
I would say yes, for sure. From the NGO side, yes. In the business world, it might be a bit difficult, but what maybe we can see if we communicate exactly what we want to achieve. There was a vision. Then I feel, at least from a business perspective, I mean, I would say they invest even if they see the big result, and it's not about administration costs we have to pay extra, or a local project manager extra that we have to pay. If the idea of what we want to achieve at the end is where people say, wow, exactly, this is what we want to do, then it is comparable, much less hindering than not. So it is a vision and how and why we need certain things that makes a difference, I believe. I understand fully if small NGOs, especially the smaller ones, they say, well, if I start doing that, it might be hindering. But on the other side, I see also if you look at, for example, LinkedIn, where now you have a lot of application offers from many organizations, that they look for localized solutions, network solutions. They want to know the partners you're working with. I think that the trend has started, and maybe we have to be a bit more courageous even to do it. And it's not an A or B. It can also start in parallel to do that. So that it would maybe not just saying, stop now, how we did it, and now we talk about all these things only. Because it's understandable if you understand it. I mean, if you see it. I think the biggest issue is if you find out as a funder afterwards that, I don't know, a certain percentage, I mean, out of the 9 goats, only 5 goats arrived. And then you say, why? I wanted to fund 9. And then you're very frustrated. But if you say, hey, you invest in 9, but 5 will arrive because the 5 then will be embedded in a better surrounding. And this means also we have to do many other things around, and their administration fees. I think people would believe much more in it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting the choice of numbers, 9 to 5, because nobody can work 9 to 5 or do an NGO a normal day's work at 9 to 5. Sorry, Jessica, I jumped in ahead of you. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment because it's something I did think a lot about over the last months and years on how to better communicate. And I would argue we need to differentiate perhaps between cold, I will call it cold acquisition, or warm contacts, which means if I am talking to all those 158,000 people who already are donating to Save the Children Germany, I have other formats and ways to talk to supporters and to better explain the long-term impact we are trying to achieve, versus those who have never heard about Save the Children and who, I absolutely agree with Michael, are not stupid, but they are living in a very busy world full of information flows and their own private issues, professional issues, things that happen on top. And so I think it's very important to cut through the noise. And I'm not sure, I am sure, I am personally sure that you cannot cut through the noise with a message that is too complex to get it in less than 3 seconds. So if I would go back to what Manuela said, and I would think, yeah, so let's share more to these cold audiences. Let's share more about the broader vision and the impact that we are achieving as Save the Children. That would translate into every child has a right to grow up healthy. Every child has a right to go to school. But and no one will disagree. Hopefully, a few people will disagree. I don't want to get to know them, those who don't agree. But it's very important. I don't think that you would donate on it, because you can't feel what is exactly in this mystery of the big black box on how every child can grow up healthy, what is happening to your 10 euro per month. And therefore, I think the better strategy is probably to be as concrete as possible and live with the fact that what you're actually doing is much more complex and bigger. But once people are supporting you and continue to support you, to take them along on a journey to fully understand the fabulous impact that they are helping to achieve.
Maybe it is this kind of storytelling. I have an example from farmers, let's say, in Kenya. And normally, let's say, our NGO there, they would say we need support for the farmers in terms of harvesting skills or seeds, and then you get your funds. When you start to tell the story, it does not mean that if they have better farming skills or better seeds, that now they would earn more money. So I think here is where we should tell more about the story, because they would need even storage rooms. They need mobility, to bring the harvest to the, let's say, main road, which might be even 2-3 hours away. And they need to have even good business skills. So, and if we bring these pictures of how or what all is needed to really now make more income happen to these poor farmers, as a message, maybe then they understand also why we have to think in that more complex way, and why we have to invest in certain other things, and why we need administration. This was my point. Sometimes people don't see the full picture. They see that there's one need, and this is where we want the funding for. But at the same time, maybe we need to somehow to find a way to make them understand the full picture of what is needed really to make your initial funding a long-term success. Let's say it like that. And it's not just money, it's skills, it's many things. So I have not even found the best way. And I think we all try to bring video materials, testimonial stories, such kind of things. And it's difficult to get to the people, because very often they do not have so much time, and it's not their main topic, and they just want to have this good feeling, or they say, okay, I'm very much interested to help children, and therefore I put some money there.
I have a question on that, because I think I'm not a specialist in fundraising, so I have a question for Jessica on that, for example, because I think logically it makes sense for me that you need to, like, for the cold acquisition, you need a simpler hook, so to say. How do you think there is also a place within that to be very clear of how each individual NGO plays its role within a wider network? So like, say, like Kenyan farmers, so if you give people a goat, that's all nice and well, but if there are I just spoke with a friend of mine who works on a project in Kenya as well, and she said in certain regions there's also still very much pastoral tribes who move around, and where there is no stability. So if you give a goat, and then you might not be sure that if you come back that your goat is still there because someone has stolen that might not be the role of your organization. But how do you communicate then that, okay, this is our role and we need to work together with another role to be part of a political change that actually the goat is more stable? And that's already a pretty complex message. Do you think there's a way in simplifying that by saying, okay, we have this role to play within a more complex system?
Mm-hmm. From my perspective, it depends very much on the channel you're communicating through and the target group you are talking through. So if we're talking about mass marketing, and you imagine a digital advertisement at the central station or a short video spot, I think it's very, very difficult to get the message through. While if you are talking more to philanthropy audiences, so for instance, 1/6 of our income is generated through very strategic collaborations with companies. And on all what Manuela said in the very beginning, also on impact investment and on creating shared value and so on. So in these settings, where you have open-minded people who are engaging in order to create change, I think that is an ideal surrounding where it's even important and beneficial to talk about these broader systemic changes, the role of different actors in it, just like you said, the combination of local civil society with global civil society, with companies, universities, and politics. Then the channel needs to be a one-to-one conversation where you have the time to elaborate on it.
It's a very good point, Jessica. I had to really say one little thing because it reminded me of what I was trying to do 2 months ago. I mean, it's important to have one-to-one channel and to talk to people according to what type of donors they are. But I was very amused that there is nothing. I was trying to find before and after impact by any big NGOs anytime on the internet. So I'm not the direct donor, so to say, that the type of donor that you're talking about, but I wanted to see what impact have NGOs actually created at a big scale. Now I found momentary photos and videos of course, loads of work that NGOs have done, but they were all momentary. They looked small. But I know for a fact that the impact that we have created is actually huge, but there is no, so to say, proof on the free internet to find for people who are trying in pictures, like in small stories. And that's the whole thing about, of course, you can find elaborate reports probably somewhere. And I'm talking about, no, I just wanted some picture. Before it was this area had no goats. And look, there's another picture after 10 years. There is 10 goats standing. So something very simple so people can, and this, I don't know why, maybe it was me not looking, but I was also didn't have so much time. I had like 15, 20 minutes and I was trying, and I didn't find anything that I felt frustrated. I was like, how is that possible? NGOs have been active for, I don't know, 70 years for sure. And if I would look for a company's impact, it would tell me how good they are within seconds in whatever they're doing. And I know it is because of the complexity, but it's not there.
Yeah, I think after this episode is released, the share price of goats is going to go sky high because we keep talking about how important they are in NGO activities, which is wonderful. Hey, we love goats. What's also interesting is within the questionnaire and the responses, more importantly, people didn't only highlight the impact of external issues and components such as reduced funding and so on. They also highlighted exactly the things that you've been talking about here. So communications are often too complex and confusing. Target groups are not being reached, which is also what you alluded to, Jessica. And in addition, what all of you have alluded to in different ways is the impact of communications is not measured and the analysis is lacking as well. So these are all sort of internal issues which NGOs could perhaps improve upon. And this is the internal skills gap, which I think you referred to as well, Saroj. Well, the reason why I'm saying this is NGOs are aware of some of their own internal failings. And yet, for some reason, it's not so easy, or for a number of different reasons, it's not so easy to address these failings. Can anyone give any insight as to why it's so difficult in some circumstances to change the way an NGO works or operates? I mean, we've all heard about change management and a mindset reset and so on. But practically speaking, I mean, how tough a process is it to introduce these changes?
I can share my opinion on it, and it has something to do with overhead costs. I think it is. I see people doing double the amount of work that I would have seen, which I've done in a for-profit world, for half the amount of money that people are getting. And if you're talking about, it's not that people are not capable. I think that's another point that we should talk about. How NGO employees are perceived. If I'm talking about for-profit, right? It's the first, and I've heard that from people that I know in for-profit world. It's like, oh, they consider, oh, maybe they just don't know how to do it. That's not the case. That's what I want to say really out loud. People are extremely capable, extremely also motivated to learn and remove the gap. The problem is that amount, in my opinion, there's just half the amount of people doing the same amount of work that would be done in a for-profit. So we do need to be more open about overhead costs. And there are ways, accounting ways, where people are trying to put across only half the overhead costs. They say, oh no, it's only 10% or 9%, but in reality, it's an accounting trick to be able to kind of show the donors. We shouldn't be put in that position in the first place. We should be able to invest in people because we need it. That's kind of my opinion.
Yeah, and from an outer perspective, what I realized with some NGOs is, at the end, we are all human beings. And if you are told to change or to do something more innovative, it sounds very good, but at the end, it also struggles, or it causes struggles because you think, well, what about me? What will be about my job? We have been successful. We have done it for many years like that. Now we should change. Why? People are telling this to us who might not be the most experienced people, young people, or they come from outside, they come from the business world. So naturally, there are also some walls built on both sides. Yeah, it's like very often we from business, we hear, this is business, they want to make profit. Yeah, they are not driven by social ideas. And in the same way we say, okay, in NGOs, they did good jobs, but they're too social. They don't understand how to make it financially viable and really to make it sustainable. So a lot of, and I think this is not true. Yeah, it might be true, but it is in many cases not true. And it depends so much on what NGO, what business, what people you are talking to. But this is a very human component that I want to mention. Yeah, first of all, innovation is great as long as I do not have to innovate. And secondly, also these kind of prejudices, because there is this NGO world and there is this business world, and we do the better job, so we are the good guys and the bad guys. And I think this is also something, a big challenge that we have to overcome, and to be more the bridge builders in the future between these two worlds, if we want to mention, how to say that these are two worlds, because at the end it's one world. Yeah, but this is what I very often hear, and NGOs do not measure in the right way. Yes, because they measure it in a different way. So it might be an idea to measure differently. For example, these annual reports. Let's say when we get NGO reports, very often you have the pictures, you have nice descriptions. It's not the numbers that are highlighted. In a business report, it's the numbers which you see at the first point, and then you start to read the stories. So it depends now, maybe we can adapt it according to the target group, like Jessica said. If you want money or if you want support by business people, first of all, maybe you have to argument with numbers. And secondly, you should also see them not as money givers only, and vice versa. In NGOs, we should not just characterize them as the social good guys, but really as very capable people as well to deliver business-like wise outputs and outcomes there.
Definitely, fully agree with you, Manuela. I also wanted to say we should introduce a kindness KPI in numbers somehow. Michael, sorry, you want to say something?
No, yeah, more or less that. But look, first, I want to echo your comments from before. Look, I worked for a bank for 10 years, so I know about people looking at numbers, but it's also it's kind of the complexity, right? So the numbers by themselves are not neutral, certainly not in the areas that we're working for. So it's a lot easier to measure things when you're working for a bank because you're just looking at the bottom line. And like even there, you can look at short-term profits and long-term structural profits, etc. But for an NGO, so the question is, okay, what are the numbers we want to measure? What are the things you can actually capture in numbers? What are the things we need to be open about, saying, okay, this is a judgment question, but there is no one clear number that can measure it. And is that a popular message to communicate, right? But so what number do I put on the successful increase of human rights in actually in Germany? So and I know there are different, I don't know, you could look at free speech index or whatever, but even they are limited. So apart from the fact that there are many capable people working very hard, the thing to achieve is more difficult. So with less resources. That's not an excuse not to do it, but that's for me a framework how to also be realistic about it. And I think we also should not overpromise, because then you're only going to disappoint.
Not sure if this is important to you, but we have started even to measure in our networking tenure a so-called network index, where we measure how strong, I mean, these are 7 NGOs, how strong they collaborate. And now you can imagine you can define criteria and do these criteria to the fulfillment of these criteria numbers. So, for example, you could say, okay, do the NGOs just meet once a year, or do they share materials, or do they even send active trainers of solution they had to other NGOs, or do they even organize events together or run a product shop from community work together? And in this way, we use this network analysis tool to create a kind of system index. So on how do these NGOs collaborate? Of course, this means also the impact is much bigger for the communities, because then new solutions come in and there is an exchange of ideas, many more awareness sessions, which normally would happen based on a project in just one location, now are even traveling locally without the funder being involved from A to B. And the interesting thing was to observe that in the NGOs, when we started to measure it, they also calculated their own network index. So let's say in the network, we had a 4.3. And then, of course, they could also calculate their own index. Where do we stand? And they said, oh, I have a 3.9. And this guy has a 4.8. So why we are not so good at them? What do we need to do? And this was in 2022. And they want to measure it every year. And what I observed is that just triggering the measurement on how they connect has led to a lot of very active exchange among them. And this is what I say, maybe we have to think even a bit beyond the traditional numbers, project-based numbers, but even think how can we maybe also start to measure collaboration, and I mean also local scale, yeah, and not just, let's say, the scale that we have somehow put in our project description or something like that. We are even still at the beginning, but it is very interesting, be it from a psychological standpoint, to see how the NGO leaders start to do it, to get higher numbers, but also at the end to see the impact it has, because now we have in many of these NGOs many solutions, or many more than what we had if we just were depending on project that we get funded from outside. Yeah. So I'm looking for people who could think through with me on that, and by the way, and how to develop it further. But it's interesting.
I mean, the questionnaire that was sent out broke things down into a number of different areas, and some of the the issues which came in the second part of the questionnaire, which refers to the changes that are needed over the next 10 years for NGOs to overcome or to become more effective. And some of the issues we've already mentioned, you have already mentioned, more to the point. And looking at some of the points that were raised, there are some issues which I think need to be highlighted a bit more. One of them, I think you mentioned yourself, Manuela, as well. It's participatory decision making with the inclusion of those most affected by the project or work. Do you have anything to add to that in addition to what may have been written in the questionnaire? And why is it perhaps that to this point, this kind of participatory approach hasn't gathered more steam?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm still 100% convinced that it should be the participatory style, because it's the communities, it's the locals who know the best what is needed. Yeah, very often it's still, let's say, us here deciding what we think does fit now and what is the best. Unfortunately, even the funders think in the way like we do. Yeah, they want to give what they think is the right thing to do. Anyhow, if we do not communicate what the communities, what the local NGOs really need, and give at least us as let's say NGO leaders or coordinators or whatever the information, and we promote it, then this cannot happen. And this is also a big gap. So for me, it's important to set up projects that do not just fit to the people, but that are also wanted by people, and that are, at least if the idea is in the room, I go back to them and say, hey, here we would get some money. How could we organize it now in the best way that you really have the biggest impact or benefit out of it? And not just, to make it very concrete, I could go and say, okay, a health company is giving money now to avoid diabetes. Diabetes rate is very high. We do screenings, but and everyone would say, perfect, yeah, I get the money, do it. The communities tell me, look, if we screen, many people might not even have the money to go to a doctor or to the medicine or to get medicine for a chronic disease. So there is where then the discussions with the people started. What would be the best thing if we want to do something against diabetes? Maybe we focus more on prevention if the treatment is not possible now. And this means more awareness campaigns, helping more with nutritious projects or elements at least in this project, and do a bit less screening, but more for prevention and to raise awareness, let's say, that they should avoid sugar and that they should move more, something like this. It is not the best solution, but it is, I personally think, better than being able to say, I have screened 10,000 people, where from 200 should have gone for sure to the doctor because they are highly diabetic, but then out of these 200, 198 cannot do it. What kind of benefit is that? Yeah. Even if I can say I have screened 10,000 people. This is where I say here it's with the communities and not for the communities, we should think.
And also earlier, right at the top, Jessica, you mentioned we should ask the children what they want, what they need. And that's also a participatory approach, right?
Absolutely, and that's what we do. But I do think there's still a big gap on advancing on localization. So at shifting power, basically, to really empower local organizations, actors, and communities versus global NGOs and traditional power relations.
Yep. Yeah. Go on, please, Saroj.
Oh, no, I just wanted to add to, just because a participatory action is one of the bigger themes in Save the Children. So I'm very proud that they kind of think forward and are acting already on it. But as Jessica said, localization needs more than one-sided action. It needs structural changes in the way we have worked in past decades. And that's very difficult. But I'm happy that we're taking steps, I guess.
And this way, it's not just us telling us; it's also the politics. If you look at Germany, what now they what are they say the big words is okay, make it locally, make it multiple partnerships, make it a partnership relationship. I mean, as long as we decide what we do, I don't see that it is really a partnership approach. With the local NGOs. So I think in theory, we all know this would be the right way to go. Practically, I'm fully with you. It is still a very huge challenge too, because it means we also have to change in the way on how we think, on how we act, on how we measure many things.
And sometimes I wonder personally how much of that is vision and good intention and how much is a really realistic idea that can be carried through. Because if you look on how decisions are being taken, it's usually, where the money comes from. So, for instance, if the German government through the Ministry of Economic Collaboration, moves more towards funding local organizations, that is probably a bigger way of making it happen than NGOs with limited resources trying to there's a big agreement that localization is right, but from feeling that it is right to shifting decision making from where the money comes, there are many steps in between, and it's not always possible to make that change. So what I want to say is, even if we are trying to make big steps on localization, we are still very far away from getting there. And this is now not the view of Save the Children officially, but my personal question is that good enough? And is that a realistic approach on making change happen? Because if it's also, as a global NGO being across 110 countries, of course, if 60% of your income comes from one specific market, there is a natural connection from, I am generating this money and I need to have a say in how it is spent. So letting this totally go, I think is, I don't know, perhaps it's not a very realistic idea.
But it's a legitimate question to ask. And I think this has a bit to do with, in my understanding of what Manuela said, we are asked to change the way we are set up. And it's difficult to see how are we going to do it, because
it's very difficult. You need to remove yourself, basically.
That's true. Yeah.
Especially this kind of exit thinking. This should probably drive also our decisions. So what I mean is, whatever I do or wherever I give money to, let's say, and even if now I use international NGOs to do that, the ideal status would be if in, let's say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, these communities would not need any more that money, right? And they would not need us anymore. And to empower the local NGOs, the local communities in a way that then they can grow on their own and build these relationships maybe as well. And there is this human thing, okay, then we cancel ourselves. What is about us again? But it would be, if we really are serious about making the world, in that case, or in this sense, a better world, we should start with thinking, what do the communities need to be self-empowered in a way that they can make it? What are the needs they have? And who are now the partners we have to bring in, the projects we have to bring in over the year that this can really happen? And this would be a different approach than saying, I'm looking for funds for goats, even if this is a small need of the whole thing. Yeah. This is not a criticism. It is just a statement. It's an observation. Yeah, what I see.
The poor goats.
Yeah, the poor goats.
So what do the goats say about it? Now, like to come back on what Jessica just said, because it's something we have as well within Amnesty. So it's a big international organization, and there are so it's split into local sections, and there are donor sections, and there are recipient sections. So and then within that, it's still easier, right? Because we're all part of Amnesty International, so it's easier to say, okay, let's bring part of the funding that's being generated in Germany, which happens to historically be a richer country, try to transfer it to local sections where they can have their own decision making. But it's not. I think for me, key thing is that it's not a black and white thing. It will be somewhere in the middle, right? Because in the end, like certainly people in fundraising in Germany, you cannot exit yourself because your capabilities of getting in the funds and for partially transferring it to local organizations, but partially you need that translation effort to keep on generating the funds, because otherwise it will dry out and it will become less. And look, I feel horrible for saying that, because it almost sounds like this, oh yeah, as long as we grow a piece, the pie bigger, then the distribution is less of an issue. Now, that's not what I want to say, but I think you need to look both at the size of the pie and how it's being distributed.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. I think it is simply about being conscious and sharpen the roles that the different actors have. So I don't mean to say that we should, at a global level, remove all NGOs. I'm just saying that at the global level, we should make sure that localization is being taken seriously, and that the roles of these actors are redesigned and sharpened, just like ours. But yes, in my view, it would mean you don't have a technical program expert sitting behind a desk in Berlin to take decisions or directions or advice in any way on how your goats in Kenya should be better. Get from 5 to 9 goats and all of them are healthy. I think that is something that should happen in the country across a variety of relevant actors who have experience and expertise. And I personally see also a big role of companies to contribute with the expertise. I don't see that at all as anything harmful. I think it's totally legitimate. And sometimes if you are, for example, if you're a big logistical companies, why shouldn't NGOs use your infrastructure, your expertise, your business in order to deliver your own goods and services on humanitarian needs, for example? But when it comes to the global role, I see that very much both on an advocacy level. So I think having, a high number of local actors isn't enough. It's an added value by a global entity to pull these interests together and to have a strong reach and influence and opinion towards a political landscape in the respective countries. So I think that is something where the global can, and sometimes also the brand and the size, can have a really relevant weight to get your appointments. So I saw, for example, once a few years ago in Guatemala on a project visit with a company, that we were invited to the Ministry of Education, and they did a whole lot of celebration to welcome us, a whole big effort. And it really struck. I was like, I wasn't aware. I felt a bit like a princess. I wasn't aware of my role and power, and it made me realize that the role of Save the Children in Guatemala is entirely different than the role of Save the Children in Germany, where we would hope for a personal meeting with anyone in a ministry. I'm making it a bit black and white, right? But just to make the point, so on that, I think if we talk about localization and the different roles, the global level has, in my view, big potential on political work, big potential on mass mobilization. So let's say more the public campaigning that, for instance, Amnesty is doing in a very fantastic way, with a lot of activism on the ground, groups and engagement. That is something you can't do as well from Kenya if you want to address the German audiences, the German public, right? So that's a very critical role. And then, yes, funding, obviously. I mean, Germany is the second biggest fundraising market worldwide after the US. And we still get, I mean all NGOs, civil society, we still get much too few funding out of such a big market. That's, I mean,
I have to say
on a global scale. Yes.
Yeah. So it would be correct to say, so localization, we should think our role in the past was to lead a program, so to say. From lead, it should convert into support, supporting the system. Agenda should, we agree, definitely come from people who are affected by it. So it shouldn't come from top down, rather, I wouldn't even call it top down, but rather center outward and not outward inward, other way around. And there is a need to change in the way we calculate impact. So not copy paste what is done in a profit, but we need different type of KPIs to be able to calculate it. And I don't have an idea. For example, what you talked about, Manuela, your network index. I found it amazing. I didn't hear about it before, and I said, okay, this is something that we need an innovation in impact calculation that hasn't been done before, probably. But to change ourselves from thinking we are the leaders of this program that we're running, we say we are the supporters. Is that something that is what you wanted to say, or am I saying it too black and white as well, Jessica?
I totally agree with you. I would say our role is perhaps an enabling role, whether it's ensuring the money flows, whether it's at a political level, in trying to influence, as hard as it is, obviously. But yeah, I agree. And I think on the what we are talking about is actually on more non-monetary KPIs in NGOs. And I was just remembering, it's quite a while ago, but back in 2007, when I did my MA, in the final essay, so to say, I did analyze the capability approach. I don't know whether you ever heard about it. It's a capability approach by Amartya Sen. And that is all about getting a broader perspective on non-financial KPIs, so on which capabilities you need to strengthen in order to deliver on a certain goal. So yes, I agree we need more non-monetary KPIs, but I also do think that we have already done 20 years of thinking about this, and there is, to a certain extent, there is already quite a good framework.
Mm-hmm. And then we come back to what Manuela said before, that we probably need to say what we need, which doesn't happen so much, right?
And let me even underline, I like how Jessica even put it. This door opener opportunity is nothing
right.
the local NGOs have. This is definitely something that has to be done by us here. And therefore you need a name, you need to have the contacts, and everything. I can just talk about my own experience, but I think that the little NGOs, even being really good NGOs, be it in India, be it in Kenya, they would not have been at the point where they are without having the door openers. Yeah, because even, let's say my company has funded a lot, but we had many other partners coming in, but they did not come in because they contacted them no one know them. They are too small. I mean, names like Amnesty, like Child Fund, like Save the Children. This is where people, start to say, okay, this is on my level. Here we can now talk. Yeah, especially if you think about the big funders. And this is our role, and this is also our opportunity somehow to build these kind of bridges. And without that, even on a local level, they will struggle. There is a big hope, a big thing of, a big bundle, a big work to do, mountain of work to find the right ways to do that. But
And is there any non-financial KPI that would capture that role as a door opener? Or is that then the area of things that's just a bit harder to measure?
It's a good question, yeah. And I mean, no one is publishing numbers on it, yeah. I mean, I have not seen any report who says we have brought in so many partners from those different sectors who now are also helping in whatever way, yeah, maybe with funds, maybe with skills. But this would also be very attractive for others maybe to see, look, how they are really trying to bring together the different connections and dots to really make the change at the end a better one. Could be a good idea, yeah.
What I find inherently problematic for door openers is the counterpoint of gatekeepers. When you find yourself developing access to a certain sector which can bring in perhaps opportunities, people are very afraid of losing control of those opportunities. People don't want to oh no, then we lose our funding. Yeah, we don't want to share and so on. But unfortunately, that at some point spirals down to reducing our own income over a sustainable period of time for whichever NGO or whichever organization it is that has access to that market. Whereas by opening the door wider, the stream perhaps would then become bigger. You can bring more partners on board. And coming back to the questionnaire, I mean, I may be reading your responses automatically, but I mean, there are issues which are addressed there, as in developing partnerships and twinning with companies. Seeking companies or organizations to include NGOs as partners. So developing these relationships is also something which a lot of the responders to our questionnaire definitely highlighted. And another issue which you kind of touch on as well, Manuela and Michael, greater transparency and operational openness. If there are organizations out there who are achieving these access points, they're not talking about these things. Why aren't they talking about these things? And perhaps if they were to talk about these things, then we could also, as Jessica says, the larger global organizations, global NGOs, can take some of the smaller ones, put them on their backs and carry them forward and help out a little bit. Let them sort of benefit from the jet stream. Maybe that's what we also want to create with this questionnaire, this movement, is to develop those structures for the smaller NGOs, and at the same time, capacity development in larger. Sometimes there are larger NGOs that can't do certain things that the smaller NGOs can do. Maybe they can fulfill some of those capacity gaps that maybe have been recognized.
I have a personal hypothesis to answer your question. Well, not fully personal, like also based on conversation with colleagues here, but the hypothesis is that at the one hand, we like having power to change things for the better. And at the other hand, we're also highly suspicious of our own power and privilege, and are therefore kind of ashamed of it. And like a door opener position is very much like a power privilege thing. And so so the shame is not necessarily a bad thing, right? It comes from a history where there's been that power and it hasn't been questioned, and therefore there's this counter reaction, I would say. But the danger is to go back too far and do not acknowledge the power that is there to change things for the better, And it's of course vitally important to remain open to feedback on that, on how that power is being used, and also to be, as you say, to share it, to find out what is my role and what's my role now, and how do I envisage my role in maybe 20 years? How do I see that power develop? I don't have a real conclusion to that thought, but that's my general feeling on your question.
I see the point. Of course, the one who can open the doors has the power to decide which doors he's opening or not. And he can even open doors that might even damage at the end. But on the other side, I think, let's say we as door openers would not be alone. It depends on how you set it up. If you say, for example, we have always this backup, the local backup with the local NGOs on one side, then of course you would also make sure that you are not just going in one direction, but you bring in a variation of partners and you give them or even a voice somehow, even from a global perspective, and maybe even to connect. Why not collaborating? Let's say Save the Children with Amnesty and a corporate to open the doors. It is not that you have or that we have to do it alone. This would be my vision, to say, okay, we have one common vision, which is also somehow grounded. Let's now take again Kenya here in that region. We want to develop it. And together now we bring together the three partners, one who's more, let's say, in environment, the other one who is more human oriented, and the third one maybe animal oriented, and they would bring in together the right partners to make that happen. Then you have also kind of control, and it's not just this one person or one organization who says, oh, I think now we open the door to you so that, I don't know, this one thing can happen. This is just theory now, but I think we are still not good enough in collaboration, even at that level. We are too much, into our own organization thinking. And here, of course, we try to do the best. But if we think across sectors in this way, to achieve something then that is much bigger, then we need also to collaborate much better in door opening. And this would also include then a kind of control. If this is could be. Not sure what you think about it.
No, this is because I think in one of our last podcasts, Zach, we spoke about, why don't we have, like in for-profit, merge together for a cause, for a bigger cause, because it's complicated and you can't do it alone. It is very normal practice to go and say, hey, let's merge together into one company, or maybe a joint venture, even if it is not a merger, right? It's a similar thing. And then you have multiple keys and you can't open the door unless the other person is also putting it back here.
Yeah, you need to be to have some visionaries among them, because otherwise, I mean, in your own organization, if you're successful in a simpler way just to fulfill what the organization expects from you, this is what many people say. And you will hear a lot of questions. Why do you do that? I mean, we are a company in the sector ABC, so let's just go in for the sector we are in, let's say from a company perspective, and not why do you bring all your efforts to now think systematically beyond our sector, to that, beyond projects. So this is a bit the reality behind, And on a personal level, of course, as well, many people say here, I want to be successful in my job. I want to fulfill the expectations of my organization, to make my next career step, or to get my next step done that I have in mind. So why should I engage beyond? And anyhow, I'm doing good things. So it is this box thinking, this organization. Every organization has its own vision and mission, and this is where we are in.
But I think on collaborating across different actors, where there's also plenty of examples where this is already a daily reality. Like whether it's on an operating level, I think there is big collaboration on a daily basis across many big, for example, humanitarian NGOs who all work in one and the same place. So there's definitely a lot of collaboration already going on. And even here in Germany, if you look at campaigns like Luft nach oben, you have like around 20 organizations who jointly make a push towards increasing public funding, basically, by the German government. But that's my second point, collaboration takes time. And so we started this podcast on the lack of resources, the lack of administrative costs, and I would argue that's all needed if you want to go even beyond your own company's vision and mission and your role description, so to say.
No, I just wanted to add, and maybe beyond projects.
Yeah.
I mean, I see collaborations happening a lot, but it is mostly on projects. Mm-hmm. It is not on a higher level where we say we really want to empower these communities long term in many, many different ways. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's great also that you tied it back around to that too. What I feel is that a lot of smaller NGOs don't necessarily benefit from these partnerships. I think they get left out far too often. I think we need to try to introduce structures which inherently include them and also use them as not just contributors, but also to manage and co-manage projects and activities and to give them a greater voice. And another issue about collaboration, which I found, is who chooses the partners? Because I think this is also a kind of a gatekeeping issue. A lot of organizations tend to go with big names, which are not necessarily fundamentally specialized in non-governmental work, but they are businesses. They are businesses that provide services in certain areas which don't necessarily have charitable intentions at their core, like an NGO would do. And so this is also perhaps, in some cases, an element of developing groups that collaborate, which may need to be addressed at some point. I'm sure we've got lots of other opinions as well, but we've got time for one more little mini issue before we wrap up, and that is AI. So we can see now AI is a huge issue in the world of communication and business and so on. But people who responded to the questionnaire have also recognized AI as a sector which NGOs will need to focus on today, not just in the future, but now, yesterday even. Who would like to start that one?
Happy to. As a work on digital transformation for Amnesty as well. So it's an interesting topic with so many aspects that it's almost like hard to cover it in a small wrap up. Because let's say there are broadly two sides. There are potential benefits and huge potential risks and ethical concerns around AIs and the AI models and what they're based on, etc. And I think the mistake would be to focus on either one of them. So you need to have both of them in mind at the same time. So like if you talk about effectiveness, it would be as if I would say, yeah, like I don't really like how my laptop is being sourced and some of the metals that are in it, because I don't, and therefore I do all my work with pen and paper. Then I'm not make effective use of my time. And the same thing would be true. I really don't like the way that AI models are being created and the training data, how they're being sourced or not sourced, just taken. And therefore, I don't want to use AI at all. But my time will be a lot less effective. So my call would be to not, at one hand, not try to be pure, but also not be careless. And it's a difficult balancing act.
I think it's very important to have we're working on it and Save the Children have a policy and have ground rules and what are the do's and the don'ts to be able to responsibly use AI. I would never say, I think this could answer some of our questions about overhead issue. We on purpose are not saying we want to replace people. I mean, we don't have enough people to replace anyway. So I would say, say AI would be another addition. I hope at a lower cost. We're not that far yet. It's not for nothing. We obviously pay for using it, but to have better results in a shorter time so everyone can concentrate. No one has to spend an hour on research, but rather can take that support from the AI and concentrate on creating more impact for the world.
Yeah, I'm not an AI expert, and I get every week a lot of advertisement of what we could do, and it's usually based on a use case that is very compelling, but sometimes I feel very challenged by seeing the bigger picture and by understanding, this all sounds good, but perhaps you wouldn't need AI, you would simply need automation and you could reach the same goal. So what I mean to say is I feel that it is such a universe of possibilities and also of very fast development. So looking at today versus looking at it in about 3 months' time can already change. So I have trouble in navigating these opportunities, but also risks that are associated with it. However, at a small level, let's say, we see already benefits from it. So, for instance, we were saying we lack resources, and of course, automation or the use of AI can help us in being more efficient, I would hope. So, for instance, when we do due diligence screenings for collaborating with public figures, for example, and we want to understand the associated risk of bringing our brand together with a certain personality, it used to take my team around 2 hours by screening. And now they are doing it with Copilot, and they do it in 30 minutes. So that's just a very small, concrete example where we save 90 minutes on what we, and instead we could do more or other things. So I agree that it is something we absolutely need to focus more on in order to understand where the opportunities are and where the risks are. But I personally think we are far away from, we are far away, and I feel sometimes a little overwhelmed by finding the time of having a good overview and also perhaps a more neutral advice on what we could do or could not do. And it's really, I think that is one of the biggest opportunities probably for NGOs with scarce resources. But however, ironically, it would need resources to make use of it. So that's why I am very impressed that Amnesty and Save the Children have roles on digital transformation, because I don't know, 10 years ago or so, that probably wasn't the case, right? So that's already good to have you guys, Michael and Saroj, to help navigate this transformation.
Yeah, from my side, let's say in the corporate world, AI nowadays plays a very, very big role. I mean, here, of course, there is a lot of trainings, a lot of possibilities even to use AI tools. And I see personally also how it saves time, all the things you have mentioned. But what I want to add here is we have in our Canyon network, we have put AI as a network topic since last year. Because for me, the question came up, does the lack of knowledge how to use AI widen the gap between rich and poor? And so we started a survey in our communities and our local NGOs. And of course, we found out, okay, there is a lack in terms of maybe digital tools, internet flat rate.
But the biggest issue we found out is normally the young people in Kenya. They are bright, they are good, and they even know about AI. Even in the most rural areas, they have no access to it. But when they have access, they really love it, and they also can teach it easily. The problem is now having in our centers even possibilities to use AI, and I mean AI is a big terminology. Let's say language-based models like Copilot or ChatGPT is on one side, of course, to raise awareness about the risks, but on the other side, it is a prompt writing. So people who have not had a big exposure, I mean, maybe high-level education in theory, but not big exposure, they ask prompts in a very small way. And I feel if we could empower the communities in that way that they, for example, find more ideas themselves with what they have, what they can do, then they can help themselves much more. And to make it concrete, I asked them, okay, you have a lot of X. Now you want to set up a business. How could you, for example, ask ChatGPT? In 98%, people said, I have X. I want to become an X seller. Give me an idea after the training. The problem was that they already structured in a way, I want to become an X seller. Instead of saying I have X, what kind of business can I make out of it? Because then you get 100 ideas what you can do with X. So here I see also on one side training on AI usage. I think we should definitely go for it in the communities as well, locally, local NGOs, not just the international ones, even the local one, they would need these skills. And on the other side, we need to help them with risk trainings, because for sure this is an issue. But on the other side, it could also be it could leverage a lot of solutions so that you do not find 100 Excelers in one road, but that you have a diversification of what they have. I mean, the solutions are there. They just have to find it in the right way. And therefore, I believe a lot in this AI knowledge transfer, and we should do much more about it. Because if I see now how quick money can be done through AI ideas, I mean, just think about now how many people publish their books. They make money out of it. And now if you do it, there is a big company, they do research, or they have limited their research to produce perfume. And now they sell artificial made perfume. I mean, not artificially made, but with AI help made perfumes. They make a lot of money. Why shouldn't we give that to the communities? I mean, this knowledge on how to find the way. So for me, it's a big topic with a lot of passion behind it. Here I stop.
The questionnaire responses that we received covered a lot of really interesting topics, and it's impossible for us to go into all of them. What we would also like to do is perhaps go into a second phase where we send out the questionnaire again and get even more responses, and then hopefully come up and be able to attack some more of these topics together, maybe even bring in a few different organizations, maybe bring in some different voices from some of these local areas, perhaps from Kenya, perhaps from the goats community, depending on who we want to reach and so on. But what I really want to do is thank all of you for your time, your participation, your experience, your insight, and your passion, not just for doing the jobs that you do, of course, but also for wanting to share your knowledge and also desiring to improve the platforms generally that all NGOs obviously will hopefully benefit from at some point. So thank you all again for your time and for what you do. I never want to have the last word. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you wish, conclude or make any statement that you choose to do so as your sort of, for this occasion, your parting greeting. And then we'll close it out there. So let's go. I'll go in an order, and then Saroj, you can close it off because you made all of this possible. So let's start with Manuela.
Well, I think we should have hope. There are a lot of changes ongoing, even that might scare us, but I'm very optimistic. And let's embrace what's coming, and then identify also how we collaborate and how we use it the best. So this is my big wish.
Super. And Michael, do you have time for a quick statement?
I actually really need to go into a follow-up meeting. So I would just like to say thank you very much for the interesting exchange. Thank you.
Jessica?
Same here. Yeah.
Yes, I want to really thank you all. Take the time and support us, and Zach, especially you, to give us the platform to be able to talk about it. And I hope my wish would be if you have time to forward the questionnaire so more people can participate and we can make something more. So the aim was to have something that every NGO can look at, a structural kind of way to or points that they can look at where they can say, okay, we need to take care of this and this and this for my NGO to be able to be more futuristic, to be able so basically the ground points. And yeah, that will be my help cry, so to say, so help more and be a part of it. And I'm very optimistic as well in finding ways, different ways for creating more impact. Zach, thank you again so much.
Thank you all. Take
Thanks
care.
to
All the
everyone.
best. Good luck.
Take care. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Two and a mic. Two.